Hello there, my name is Eddie Welch and I'm a systems engineer here at Centrify. And today we're going to be discussing the Centrify Identity Platform. Specifically, we're going to be talking about shared account password management and how we can leverage the Centrify RESTful API framework built into the Identity Platform to perform automated tasks such as password checkout and check-in and things like password rotation. We're also going to be talking about JIRA automation and how integration with JIRA can provide enhanced traceability and compliance when it comes to your shared account password management. So I'm going to toggle over here to my browser, and I want to highlight my cloud tenant from a visual UI standpoint here to get a sense visually of what are the types of tasks that we're able to perform before we actually dig into the API scripts. So you can see here that I'm logged in to my tenant as a cloud administrator. And from a privilege management standpoint, I've got infrastructure options here where I can do things like give me a list of all the systems that I'm able to manage from a privilege standpoint. And you can see I've got actions to check out local accounts associated with this Windows machine. And so I'm going to check out the password for the system administrator account. Let's say it's a scenario where, this account needs to be utilized for maintenance, maybe apply some patches, or maybe it's even a break glass emergency type scenario. So you have the option to display the password or not display the password. You can choose to keep it hidden if you don't want to have the ability for someone to write it down, but that's obviously where the rotation of the password comes into play, where you can actually set up policies to say things like, okay, every time someone checks out a password for whatever reason, I want to rotate that password at the end of the check-in, which is, maybe makes sense for your particular use case. So I'm going to choose a different menu here, kind of the same thing, but a little bit of a different look. You can see the different managed accounts, local accounts on the machine, and some of the same account actions like check out, check in the password, update, rotate the password, etc. If I go back to my dashboard, and I'll do a refresh, you can see I've got an active password checkout here. It's got a lifetime associated with it. This is a default of 90 minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and check in the password. Okay, so I'm going to move over to my terminal. And you can see here that I've put together a set of API scripts using Python. Nothing fancy. I've segmented them out into multiple scripts, so it's easy to understand the different tasks that are being performed via the API. You can see I've got a configuration file for variables, but we'll start with get resources. So just like you saw in the UI, essentially get resources just gives you a list of machines. So the API call that's relevant here for this particular task is going to be the Redrock query API call. And as a parameter, I'm pushing into this API call. I'm simply doing select all from my server table. And if I go look at the documentation for using Redrock query, you can get a sense of all the different sets of information you can pull back. Really anything being anything within the cloud tenant is really you have the ability to go ahead and query that, whatever it may be. In this case, it's give me a list of managed resources. So if I exit out of the script editor and I just go ahead and execute the script, you can see that I connect to my cloud service, and just like in the user interface, all I'm doing is printing out a list of the different resources. So the unique identifier is going to be handy because the next thing we're going to do, just like we did in the UI, is get a list of accounts associated with a particular resource. And that's where that resource ID is going to come in handy. We're going to pass that as an argument to our get accounts. And really from there, what's notable here is going to be the API call, which specifies the cloud tenant, where you're getting it from, but it's the server managed get accounts for resource call. Get accounts for resource gets all visible accounts for the specified resource. And you can see here that the response in JSON format is going to give you the accounts back in a list, and it's going to be the row key as the unique identifier for the particular account. Okay. So you see here the resource ID that I included as my parameter is actually going to be passed as part of this API call to say get accounts for this particular resource. I'm going to exit out of the editor, and I'm going to actually execute the get account script. And I won't forget to include my parameter for that particular Windows machine connecting to the cloud service. And just like in the dashboard in the browser, I've got a list of accounts that I can manage. So I just happen to know this one is the administrator account, which is useful. And the next script we're going to leverage is actually checking out a password for this account. So you can see here in this script, we're actually going to pass in another argument, and that's going to be our unique account ID for the system administrator account. And once we connect to the cloud service, we're going to leverage the server managed checkout password API call, which you can see here in the documentation, checks out an account password. In the request, you want to specify the ID for the account that you're requesting to check out, and then some optional parameters, including lifetime and description. So in this example, I'm going to specify in my request parameters a lifetime of 30 minutes. So this password checkout event is going to be valid for the system administrator account for only 30 minutes. Back out of my script editor, and I'm going to execute the password checkout. Oh, let me actually go back. One thing I forgot to show, which is in addition to checking out the password, I'm also going to create a JIRA ticket. So I'm going to connect via RESTful API to a particular JIRA instance, and I'm going to create a service ticket or a project ticket to provide an enhanced set of traceability when it comes to password checkout. Obviously, the identity service dashboard is going to provide a lot of that information about who checked out, what passwords, and when. But JIRA is just another example of how you can maybe integrate that into your shared account password management workflow. So if I execute the checkout script, and I got to make sure I include my parameter for which account. So check out the system administrator account. I'll connect to the cloud service. And I've performed the checkout for the system administrator account. And you notice here that I've got a checkout ID value. So if I go over to the documentation, I've got a unique identifier for checkout ID. This is obviously going to be coming in handy when it comes to actually checking in the password, because you may have multiple that are checked out at any given time. And then obviously the password is going to be included in the response as well. Okay, so I want to hang on to this checkout ID for the check-in event. As you can see here, the password is included in the response JSON payload as well. And I've printed out my lifetime just so I don't forget. So let's verify that the checkout was actually successful by going over to my dashboard. And you can see here that the API call did in fact generate the password checkout. And because I set the lifetime to 30 minutes, it's tracking that as well. Okay. Now, the JIRA part of this is, let's say you have a particular project for shared account password management, and if I refresh this, you can see the timestamp, or the created timeline here is 1 minute ago. So here's my actual checkout event, and I've done things like, keep track of when it was checked out and by what account. And then obviously you have a status. So my status or resolution is unresolved because I haven't checked the password back in. All right, let's go back to our final script, which is going to be password check-in. And you can see that I am including two things in my input parameters for this script. That's going to be the checkout ID that we looked at just a second ago. And it's also going to be the issue ID for what JIRA ticket is corresponding with this particular password checkout. The API call that's relevant in this script is going to be your server managed check-in password. And you can see as the input parameter here, I've got my checkout ID. Once the password's checked back in, I'm going to go ahead and make another RESTful call to my JIRA instance to use that parameter to close the JIRA ticket. Go over to the documentation real quick, check in password, obviously checks in an account password, and you can see here that the input parameter is again that checkout ID that was generated. So I'm going to exit out of this script, and I think I already copied this, but just to make sure, I've got my checkout ID, and I'll execute my check-in script. The second parameter was the JIRA ticket that I want to close as part of the check-in, and that's going to be this PAS-10 ticket. So let's not forget that, and we'll execute this script. Connecting to the cloud service. Got my check-in that's executed, and then I go ahead and rotate the password. So in this particular case, I'm saying check it in, but also rotate it so it's different the next time someone tries to check it out. And then I close my ticket. So let's go verify. In the admin dashboard, I've got my previous active password checkout, and you can see here that it's no longer checked out for the system administrator account. Let's go over to JIRA. You can see my status and resolution. has now been updated to done. This ticket is now closed, and I've even added a comment as part of the check-in for some enhanced logging to just say password was checked in and it was rotated. And obviously, you can include any relevant information that's going to be useful for traceability here. Okay, so that's an example of using the Centrify Identity platform to make RESTful API calls for shared account password management tasks. The tasks we covered is getting a list of resources, getting a list of privileged resources, getting a list of privileged accounts on those resources, checking out a password, opening a JIRA ticket, checking in the password, closing the JIRA ticket. All right. So this is just one example of how to make these RESTful API calls. There's obviously many different ways that this can be performed in many different languages. That's obviously the beauty of being agnostic in that sense. So hopefully you learned something, and if you have any questions, let us know, and there will be more videos hopefully in the near future that highlight some more interesting RESTful API functionality. Thank you.